Take it away. What's your take?
Well, I mean, dollar RMB really started rising in the middle of May on the back of this disappointment over the China growth data. And so today's print, I think, basically just reinforced this idea that, China's growth is a bit disappointing and, dollar RMB has legs to go.
A lot of people were saying before that this was mostly dollar strength, what we were seeing in dollar China. Is this now mostly renminbi weakness then, that China, the macro picture is just continually looking worse?
I mean, I think there's both things going on, right? Because dollar RMB will be very much driven by U.S.-China yield differential. So obviously U.S. yields staying high is one factor. But China yields keeping on the downward pressure because of these easing expectations as data is so weak. That's also very important. I think will be even more important going forward.
How much is also this down to, I mean, literally the reopening and people going out and there's a capital outflow. There's also equity capital outflow too. So, it's based on that. So, where would we be without that, I guess, is the question, but we'll no way of knowing.
I think the outflows are driven by not just reopening and this pent-up demand to spend abroad, but it's also just, again, back to the yield differential, right? If we see the bond connect, southbound bond connect, actually there have been some outflows from there as well. So a lot of this is driven by this idea that U.S. yields are just too attractive.
Okay, so what could change this? Do you see any sort of reason that we could see an upside in renminbi? What would that be? And what is your forecast now? Because you recently just revised it.
So we are looking for 680 by year end. So between now and year end, things could still change for the better for the RMB. In the near term, I think, one thing we could look out for in terms of support for the RMB is obviously policy support, for example, in the fixings. So far, I think what we've observed is that the fixings are asymmetric, meaning to say that when the dollar is strong, the fixing doesn't really follow the dollar strength that closely. However, when the dollar is weak, the fixing actually tries to reflect a lot of that. So this is what we call asymmetric beta. But, we haven't really seen CCF kicking in. So once we see that, then we get more signs of policy support. I think that's the first thing to look out for. And the second thing is obviously, growth policy support. Yeah, then these are all domestic factors. And then externally, we are also looking out for the Fed pivot. Fed obviously to stop hiking first and then maybe pivot to a more, dovish stance. That would definitely also help dollar RMB.
What sort of stimulus is on the way at all, if at all? And where's the RMB likely to be at the end of the year, with the scenario of there being stimulus and not stimulus?
So I think right now we are thinking more in terms of more liquidity support first, and then fiscal support, especially in the third quarter. I think we should have like plenum and some other political meetings that could really set the direction.